How could she have known? Skade, brought out into the company of Utad and the warrior Bloodare the next morning, refused to even look at Osrith. And it was a good few hours before someone came to speak to her. It was Ragnar. The huge Dane stood in front of the cells and laughed when he heard that Osrith had decided to get herself locked back in. "You should come out now," he asked, and grinned as Osrith stood before him, his wife, Brida, beside him. "Why should we trust you?" It was Brida who spoke. "If we let you go north, you will report all you hear to Wessex." Osrith smiled. "For one, Wessex is in the south," she began, and then could think of no more reply. Why should they let her go? She wouldn't. And who would listen to you, anyway? One person? Behind Brida, Ethelwold stood, his arms folded. Apart from Steeper, the Lord Ethliad, the Lords Sigebrit and Ethelelm, Osrith's mouth dropped open as he listed the lords of the Witan. "You are spy, and not a good one." Ethelwold took a step to Ragnar. "As I offered last night, Jarl Ragnar, I could take this ... spy." Ragnar turned to look at Ethelwold, and narrowed his eyes. "No." He shot back, then turned back slower to Osrith. His blue eyes twinkled as he spoke to her. "My dear Brida points out that the Jarl Heston relieved you of your silver." He nodded towards Heston, who gave a reluctant grunt in reply. "As such, you are owed something. And if it is north you wish to go, then it's north you shall go." He turned to Utad, who was being shadowed, as usual, by his men. Osrith tried not to meet Finan's eye. "My brother," Ragnar continued, clapping Utad on the back, "has unfinished business in the north. He has agreed, and at this," Osrith looked at Utad, "for you to accompany him." Osrith felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. If he was going to Bibbenberg, the border of Pitland was only a few miles away, and she should be able to walk easily to it, over it. "Agreed," Osrith declared, and, totally unprompted, she added, "I swear I will tell no one of your army." She looked at the Jarl Ragnar, and nodded. "Agreed," Ragnar replied. "And now, we prepare for the entertainment, for tomorrow we march." The Danes dispersed, all except one. Osrith glanced back to the cell in which Skade still lurked. "You are free to move around the fortress," Brida told her, nodding around Dunham, assuming that was Osrith's question. "Lackland," she added, savoring the words. She looked at Osrith, and beckoned to her. "Come away from that accursed seer, come and walk with me." So Osrith and Brida began to walk around the fortress, then out through one of the side gates and beyond the fortress. "It will be the end of Utid when he goes back to Bibbenberg," Brida confided. "Here's an idea. You could go with him, Lackland. Before you go to Alba." She bent her head to Osrith and added, "I know you are a formidable fighter. Your enemy Ethelwold regaled us with your triumphs." But Osrith turned back to the woman. "Never will I set foot inside the place. Although, should he meet resistance on the way, I will do all I can." Then it was Osrith's turn to ask something of Brida. "He can still be Dane and yet of Bibbenberg if he chooses?" Brida stopped walking and turned to face Osrith fiercely. "And why are you here? I don't buy that you are traveling home." Osrith smiled. Time for the truth, one which she had carried deep inside her, despite her reluctance to admit it. "He inspires warriors," said Osrith. "I am inspired by him." Brida snorted, and then continued to walk in the ankle-length grass around the fortress. "He inspires one to lie down for him," Brida shot back. Then her tone became wistful. "But he wouldn't stay Dane for me." "I am sorry for that," Osrith said, and meant it. Clearly Brida had lost her heart to Utad in the past. "No matter." The woman shook her head. "I am with Ragnar now." "He is very handsome." Brida laughed. "Do not get any ideas, Gale. Keep your own man." "He is not my man," Osrith admitted, feeling for the silver piece. "Like Utad, he values his oath over me." "Then you are right to seek home," Brida concluded, and, banging on the front gate, they entered Dunham once more. 88,888,888. The entertainment was not to his taste, Finan told her, as he took her by the hand. feasting and drinking was all very well, and he had excused himself now. He hadn't, Osrith thought, as she glanced over to her brother. Utad was looking for Finan, she could tell. There was a tug of war to win, which Ragnar was talking up, with the help of a good deal of ale. To the hayloft above the horse's store. It was a quiet place, Finan explained, and they would not be disturbed. And afterwards, they looked at the waning moon through the loft hatch. You should not be here, Finan told her. You should never have come. Did I have a choice? Osrith asked, and she giggled, despite of herself, as Finan tickled her. Then he stopped and stroked her hair. Go away from this place, he told her. I intend to. North, remember? Alba? Even in the darkness, Finan looked pained. Osrith changed the subject. Finan? Finan. A voice called in the darkness. Her brother, of course. I heard he had gone over the border of Wetling Street, into Danelaw, and spoke to a yad man called Bjorn. Utad, she added, when Finan said nothing. He has been declared king of Mercia? Osrith supplied. Tell me the truth, Finan, she added. It was true, that is what we witnessed, he admitted, quietly as he looked out at the moon and the stars again. Finan. Utad. Damn him, Osrith thought. Of course, unless his declaration on Bebbanburg is only a ruse. Finan moved next to her, getting up. No, he means it, to be sure, but to say it loudly and pretend to be drunk was the ruse against the Danes invading Wessex, and, Finan said no more. It was complicated, and Osrith felt herself getting lost in the intrigue. And then Finan turned to Osrith again, and kissed her, before leaving the hay store above their horses and returning, she presumed, to the side of his lord. 88,888,888. Many Danes lay drunk about Dunham's fortress the next morning as Utad prepared to ride north. Horses were being saddled and food was being wrapped in leather cloths bound with cord. What happened to your cloak? Finan asked, as Osrith readied the black horse that Heston and Ethelwold had taken from her. It scratched the ground with its hooves, and Osrith wondered whether it was protesting about having her as a rider again. The seer took it, Osrith replied. It looked as if she needed it more than I did, so I didn't get it back. The woman looked between Osrith and Finan, and he strode to her, making to take Osrith's cloak. But the seer pulled it from her shoulders and flung it at Osrith, stepping back from her, looking away. I have never seen her like that before, Finan said, as Osrith put her cloak back round her own shoulders again, and Osrith shuddered at Skade's final words to her. It was as if she had actually seen Osrith banish the sun. But, it was ridiculous. Osrith had only said that to scare away Nine Fingers and his brother. The sun was being hidden anyway. She pulled herself up onto the black horse, Buey at her hip and tagged Seeks at her waist, moving her beast together next to Finan. At the back, Utad demanded, waving his hand to show her where he wanted her to be. Only my best warriors ride near me. The most dangerous place is always at the back, Ragnar commented, grinning at his brother. So I get to save your ass, Osrith nodded, smiling faintly at Utad's annoyance. He stalked over to Osrith and took her shoulder, pulling her down from her horse. She landed, her feet thumping into the mud, and she looked crossly at Utad. You, he poked a finger at Osrith, will ride at the back, will say nothing, will do nothing, and will carry out your business at a time I see fit. And should you get an attack at your rear end? Osrith asked. You fight. He shoved her away by the shoulder, and stalked back to his own horse. Then, he turned back to Osrith, as she was about to get back on her horse. You got your wish. You are riding with us now, he declared, and pulled Skade's horse's rein next to his own, as he led out of Dunham. Behind him, Canute pulled up with his piebald horse and rode beside Finan and Sihtric. Canute, Ragnar's cousin, had been sent because of the argument that had erupted between Utad and Blooder. The Jarl Sigurd had fiercely protested Utad's taking of Skade with him, and had challenged him. When I return, which will not be long, Utad had dismissed Blooder, angry, held on to his fury as Utad called for the gates to be opened, and Ragnar had assured Sigurd Bloodare that Canute would ensure Utad's return. Her brother's answer told Osrith that whatever they were doing in the north, it was not taking Bibbenberg, although of course, long was undefined. One man's long may be different to the next. Beside Heston, who was watching with a calculating expression, was Ethelwold. Osrith tried not to make eye contact with Alfred's nephew and instead turned her attention to her horse again, stroking her long neck, feeling the warmth of her body on her fingers. Osferth nodded to Osrith as they got underway, and Osrith noticed Alfred's firstborn still wore his cross in plain sight over his monk's woolen habit. "It's better at the back," he made to assure her. "Do you know, Osferth?" Osrith replied, "I rather think that there are some very fortunate people in this world." He looked across to Osrith, puzzled. "Because there are some people who have never met your Lord of Bibbenberg." Osferth said nothing, and looked ahead, and Osrith wondered whether he had understood. However, a laugh came from just in front of her, and Sihrik turned round to look at her, clearly amused by her comment. "What did I say about not speaking?" Utad called back to Osrith without turning round. "That you would save our ears by never doing it?" Osrith called back, but much quieter, which caused Sihrik to snort in laughter. "Do not underestimate me," Utad roared, turning to stare at his men. They fell silent and made their faces still as he spoke, and only Sihrik smirked when Utad turned his back to them. "It is impossible to underestimate you," Osrith retorted, stone-faced, and that did it for Osferth, and he and Sihrik laughed loudly until Utad drew his horse slower and threw stale bread lumps at them both until they stopped.